Hey everyone, welcome to Science-Based Fitness. I appreciate you clicking on the video and stopping by. In the last few years, hip thrusts have seemed to become more and more popular. And I personally am someone that's in the camp that believes that hip thrusts are a great exercise and should be done fairly frequently. Now, before you tune out of the video if you don't agree, I want to make sure you stick around, listen to some of the reasons so we can have a more comprehensive understanding on why I believe hip thrusts are a great exercise for building the glutes, strengthening the glutes, and much more. So let's jump right in. So first, let's take a look at the form of the hip thrust here. Now, I'm using a box, as you can see in the video. A box or using a bench in the situation will allow your hips to go through a greater range of motion. Now, every person's gonna be at a different fitness level, so you're gonna have to determine what type of a hip thrust you're gonna do. Are you gonna do this in more of just a simple bridge off the ground, as you can see here? So this variation, you're just laying on the ground, you're not using a bench. This is something I recommend for beginners. Now, when going through a hip thrust, I try to have my clients keep their knees about shoulder width apart and their feet about shoulder width apart. I try to focus on having my clients keep a perpendicular angle with their tibia bone and the ground, as you can see here, with trying to create roughly a 90-degree angle at the knee. Now you can see from the front view here, I've actually put a band on my knees. What this band allows me to do is activate my glute medius a little bit more. The glute medius helps with external rotation of the hips, and we've seen from the EMG data that the glute medius is not very active throughout the hip thrust. So this can allow for more activation through these glutes. This type of a banded hip thrust will be reserved for those who are at higher fitness level, and ideally we're trying to not hyperextend our spine, trying to keep our back at a neutral position. And now you can see from the side here, when I thrust my hips up here, you can see that my back stays in a neutral position throughout. I don't arch my back. This is an area where hip thrusting can become problematic. We want to avoid this at all costs. This is an exercise I mix in with most of my clients. Now, a lot of my clients have actually said that they feel the difference in the glutes as far as strength, and they notice a difference as far as firmness and size of the glutes. But I think the same principles apply here as every other exercise. Not everyone will be great at doing hip thrust. Now, I'm someone that would say that squats are probably one of the best exercises for the lower body, but a hip thrust I think should be done by everyone. And the reason is because the number one cause of lower back pain, which seems to afflict so many people, tends to be weak glutes. If we can strengthen that area without overloading the knees or the lower back, then why not? If you're familiar with my channel, then you know I like to pull up data and to make sure I back up these claims. Well, in February of 2020, there was a systematic review that looked into hip thrust. So this systematic review looked at so many different variations of lower body exercises. They looked at back squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts, front squats, belt squats, modified single leg squats, step-ups, lunges, overhead squats, and split squats. So what they found is out of these three exercises, the number one exercise for glute activation was the step-up, followed by number two, which was the hip thrust. If you're interested in knowing where the rest of these exercises fell, check out the video that I'll link at the end of the description that looks at some of the best glute exercises and evaluates which of these have the highest glute activation. So I'll link that at the end of the video. Back to the hip thrust here, and I want to point out that we know that glute activation isn't everything. We also want to make sure we can provide a overload stimulus, and hip thrusts are a great exercise that are safe for overloading. I prefer to use this as a hypertrophy exercise where I hit a rep range around 10 to 15 reps, maybe 8 to 15 reps if I want to go a little bit heavier. If you're not someone that's doing hip thrust, I think this might be a perfect movement for you to supplement into your lower body training. When we do a lot of heavy deadlifts and squats, we're not just taxing the muscles, but also the nervous system. When we can hit a movement like this that isn't directly loading the spine and isn't directly loading the knees and ankles, I think that's a great alternative to allow you to continue to do more and more work for the glutes and to have the ability to direct that fatigue away from the spine and the knees into the glutes specifically. In a 2019 systematic review that looked at barbell hip thrusts, we found EMG data that went across each of the major muscles in the lower body, looking at glute maximus medius, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and erector spinae. There was quite a bit of variation, but the one muscle that seemed to be pretty consistent was the glute maximus, which was kind of expected. Glute medius was very little activation. Biceps femoris, which is in our hamstring, which was pretty consistent across the board. They attributed this large variation due to the varying loads that were used in each of these conditions. And they stated in their discussion, barbell hip thrust exercise can introduce a high neuromuscular activity of the hip extensor muscles, especially the glute maximus, in comparison with more traditional exercises. Essentially saying that barbell hip thrusts are very comparable to other lower body exercises. So my final thoughts to wrap up the hip thrust and why I think most of us, if not all of us, should be doing this exercise, because we can load this muscle in a safe manner, provide a quality stimulus to the glutes without overloading our back or our knees, and get quality glute activation. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're not subscribed, hit subscribe, hit the like button so this video can get pushed out to more and more people. Like I said, I'm going to link right here at the end this video to your top left on some of the best glute exercises, so click there if you haven't seen that, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a good day.